What is your full name, sir?
Theodore James Klapperich.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in a small town of Mission, Texas in 1923.
So how old are you right now?
I'm 93 years old right now.
Do you feel like you're 93?
No, feel like maybe 83. I do get tired quickly, more than before, but I don't really feel old.
Physically, though, talk to me about what it's like to be 93.
Well, you have lived an awful lot and experienced an awful lot, and you have want to always give people advice because at 93 I've experienced so much that I want to give people advice. But that's one of the nice things about being an old person is that people have respect for your knowledge and your experience.
What branch of the military were you in during World War II?
I was in the Army.
What division were you in?
The 86th Black Hawk Division.
And what regiment and what company were you in?
I was in the 321st Regiment, the 321st Medical Battalion, as to serve that regiment. There were 45 of us medics that would serve 2,000 men in 6 different companies. I was assigned to a company of 200 men that I was the medic for taking care of any injuries or of any kind.
What company were you assigned to?
M Company. Company M.
And so your specific role was
to go with them during training. I trained with them, and then when we finally were in combat, I would be with them, and we go into combat, and every day when we would be ready to move out against the enemy, you would hear members of the M Company asking, "Where's the medic?" Because they wanted me to be near them in case they needed me.
And what was the highest rank you achieved by the time you left the service?
What was the what?
Highest rank you achieved?
Oh, I was staff sergeant. Yeah.
Maybe put the shirt down a little bit on that side. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I was a staff sergeant.
Now, you said you were born in Texas. Did you grow up in Texas?
No, my family moved to Michigan when I was 4 years old.
Where?
My father, his father wanted him to be a farmer in Texas, and my father wanted to be an engineer, and Detroit was hiring in the automobile industry for engineers, so my father moved to Detroit and got a job, and then the rest of the family moved up to meet him.
Talk to me about growing up in Detroit as a kid.
Okay, we lived in a normal neighborhood of families. I had 2 sisters that were older than me, and I had a brother that was older than me, and I had a brother that was younger than me. And we lived a normal life, having an awful lot of fun with each other and with the kids on the block, and going to school.
Did your brothers serve in the military?
My younger brother did. My older brother was killed in a car accident when he was about 7 or 8 years old. He ran across the street and was hit by a car. Then my younger brother, who was 2 years younger than me, during World War II, he served in the 110th not mountain infantry, parachute infantry, and he was a paratrooper. And he did not get involved in the combat, but he did participate in the occupation of Germany when the war was over with.
And talk to me about growing up in the Great Depression.
Well, surprisingly, I can't remember being poor. My parents, of course, could, relate things where they would be difficult to purchase items and so on, but we had happy times. We had wonderful Christmases as kids, and we didn't get all the stuff that a lot of kids did. We never, all of us kids, none of us ever had a bicycle. Couldn't afford one. We would make up games, make up our own toys and so on as when we were young. Going to school, in high school, I played sports, and so did my brother, and we loved that. I was the captain and quarterback of the football team when I was a senior, and we were successful, and we enjoyed that, having fun together.
And what high school did you go to?
St. Mary's High School in Royal Oak, Michigan. It was a Catholic school, about 250 students in the 4 grades.
And what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1942.
How did you hear about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
I was working in a bowling alley on a Sunday afternoon setting pins, which in those days the pins would be set by a pin boy back in the pits for the bowlers. And during a break in a game, I went up to the front of the bowling alley to buy a candy bar, and the manager said that he was listening to the radio and he heard that Pearl Harbor had been bombed by Japan. And my question was, where is Pearl Harbor? And he didn't even know where it was. So I kind of thought, I said, the manager's name was Tom. I said, Tom, what does this mean? He said, it means you'll be going into the service, like everybody, all the young men of your age.
And before I move on, can you just tell me, were there any specific instances, things that you saw or heard around you that really made you realize there was a Great Depression going on?
No, except the news would talk about, the lack of jobs that were available for workers, and business in stores was poor because people didn't have money to pay for items, but it didn't seem to affect me, the Depression.
What did you want to do with your life before the war?
I wanted to be an athletic coach in a school. I wanted to coach a sports team, and that's what my aim was. And when I graduated from high school, I applied at Michigan State University to their physical education school to become a athletic coach.
And what were the first few jobs you had growing up?
Number one, I was a pin boy in a bowling alley, setting pins for them. I caddied at a golf course. That was about the only jobs that I had were those two. And they were good beginning jobs, learning how to be a faithful employee, get to work on time, dress properly, treat the customers properly, recognize that you have a boss, and those kinds of things what we learned in the first jobs of your life. And that's what I learned.
So take me through, how did you end up in the service?
Well, there was every young man had to register for the Army or the military. And so I registered. Once you turned 18, you had to register. So I registered, and I was drafted into the Army in February of 1943. I got my notice in December of 1942 that I would be entering the Army in February. So I reported to Fort Custer at Battle Creek, Michigan, in February of 1943 for basic training and etc. And that's how I got into the service. Every young man had registered for service and was just waiting to be drafted, or they would volunteer if they wanted to choose a particular branch of the military.
So after you got into the service, take me through where they sent you.
Okay. I originally had to report to Fort Custer in Battle Creek, Michigan, where we received uniforms and equipment and so on. And then got all of our shots for immunizations. And then one day they read a bunch of names and said, these following men will get on this train to head for Camp House, Texas, which was an area in northern Texas where we were going to get basic training in military and Army. And when I was a freshman at Michigan State University, right out of high school, every able-bodied male student had to take a course called military science, which was introduction into military. We had a uniform to wear in class, learned discipline, learned the nomenclature of Army and so on. And then when they read the names of the guys that were going to get on a train to go to Camp House, Texas, we were all standing outside this train car. An officer asked if anybody had been in the Army before. Nobody had. Any of you been in the CCCs, which was a military, half military outfit? No had. Anybody have military science in college? I said, I did, sir. He said, you're in charge of the train. And I said, what does that entail? He says, when it's mealtime, make sure everybody gets fed. And when we stop for exercises, get their asses out and start jumping jacks until we get to Texas. So when I got to Texas, I lost my authority and turned over all the men that I was with to sergeants and corporals and so on. And we started basic training at Camp House, Texas, where we learned discipline, the nomenclature, the language, how to handle a weapon, how to aim it, how to fire it, whatever we were going to be doing. And of course, I was assigned to the medical detachment, so we immediately got into training for treatment of wounds and so on like that.
Take me through a typical day of basic training.
Okay, typical day of basic training, get up 5 a.m., stand for the morning report to the first sergeant, then go to breakfast, and then after breakfast, go to class for training. And you have a break at lunch, of course, time, and then have another training session in the afternoon. Always be a variety of wounds that we would take care of and so on. And then in the evening, it was just relax and maybe have a beer or two with the guys, or there might be a guys playing poker or reading or just gabbing. Basic training took 8 weeks. And at the end of the 8 weeks, and they were given ranks increased. That's when I became a staff sergeant at the end of 8 weeks. And I was assigned to M Company, which was an infantry company. And so from then on, I trained with them. When they would go out into the field for training, I would go with them in the case of the need for a medic. And that lasted for another 10 weeks. We went to Louisiana for war games, where we would be pretend war, actually, and there would be officers, colonels and generals and so on that would be refereeing and indicate at the end of the 3 weeks of war training, they would have a critique and tell us what we did right and what we did wrong. And
would you just use blanks when firing?
No, there'd be blanks, and there was one of the major concerns was crowding of a large number of soldiers together, which became a target. You know, maybe 5 or 6 guys too close together, and they had airplanes flying overhead and dropping bags of flour. And if the bag of flour, when it hit the ground and burst, if some of the flour got on you, you were considered to be wounded. And that was how they practiced that. And they kept a score. And then they, at the end of that particular training, they'd have a big meeting and tell us what we did right, what we did wrong, and so on. Then we were transferred to California for amphibious training. That's landing on a beach, because our unit, the 86th Division, was scheduled to be the first unit to invade the island of Japan. And we were training, landing on the beaches when the Battle of the Bulge occurred in Europe, and we were told to load all of our men and our equipment and vehicles and get to Boston as quickly as possible to get over to Europe to help in the European theater. So it took about 3 weeks for that to happen, however, because it took 7 days to get across the ocean in those days. So we went to Europe instead of going to Japan and invading Japan. And we were in Europe in January of 1945 is when we arrived in France and immediately went into combat. And then when the war ended in Europe, we are immediately, the entire 86th Division was sent home. Everyone was given a 30-day vacation or leave and told to report to San Francisco. And we did that and headed out for Japan. Now, it didn't include me because I'd been wounded on the 29th of April in 1945. So I was excused from going to Japan.
And Talk to me about the journey over to France from the U.S.
Aboard the ships. Well, it was crowded. I was sick all the way, seasick all the way. I didn't want to get out of I was way down below decks, and I just wanted to stay in that bunk. I didn't want to go to meals or anything. And it took us 7 days to cross the ocean. Once in a while, I'd go up on the open deck to get some fresh air, and I'd watch destroyers traveling in and out of our convoy, protecting us from German submarines and so on. And then we landed in Le Havre, France, and it took us a week to unload the ship with all of our vehicles and our armament and artillery pieces and men. And we were put in at first into what is called a quiet front. It was an area where we were close to the German soldiers. It was, actually, they were across a river from us. The river wasn't too wide, maybe a half a mile wide. We were on one side of the river and they were on the other, and it was rather quiet. Not a lot of shooting back and forth. And the very first night, this was surprising, the first night there, we heard in the evening some beautiful male singing, like a glee club, singing the song Lili Marlene. And so we joined in and sang with them. And it was the Germans, actually, who were singing, the German soldiers. So we joined in and sang along with them. The next day, we were shooting each other.
Tell me, sir, the 86th Infantry Division got into combat early March. The war in Europe ended May 8th. By the time that you guys had gotten there, the last German offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, had dissipated. But when you were on the front lines in March and April, did you all feel like the fighting had died down, or was it pretty...
It was quite intensified because we had captured some Germans, and they told us that they knew the war was they were losing the war, and so they would, like for example, in their artillery, they said, "We're losing the war. Let's use up all of our artillery shells, fire it at the Americans, and then we'll give up so that we don't get killed and or wounded and so on." And so that's the way they did it. And so they were firing quite a bit of artillery shells into our units as a final display of war. But this was April 29th was the day that I was wounded, and the war ended May 8th.
Talk to me about your first experience in combat.
Scared. When you get shot at, it's frightening. And especially if artillery shells are being exploding, because you don't know where the next one's going to be. And every 5 to 7 seconds, another artillery shell explodes someplace near you, and is it going to hit me or so on? And it's very frightening.
So what do you think about when shells are going off all around you?
I'm thinking, I hope it doesn't hit me. I hope I don't get wounded. And however, I was being hollered for. When a man gets wounded, he hollers, "Medic, medic," and so I would go over and I would stop the bleeding, make sure he's breathing, and go to the next guy that's yelling for me, and hope that I don't get hit, also. And there was, but I have to say that extremely, extremely frightening. because you don't know if you're going to be wounded, and if you are going to be wounded, what part of your body? Is it going to be an arm or a leg or your face or... And many times there was an American Jeep that was in this area, a wooded area where we were stopped, and the Germans were in the wooded area too, but there was a railroad track that went through across this wooded area, and they were on one side of the railroad track and we were on the other. The track was about 5 feet higher than the area, and they started firing artillery at us, and guys were being wounded and calling for me. And so this Jeep, however, the captain of M Company yelled to the Jeep driver to get that damn Jeep out of here. I don't want to hit. So in order for the Jeep to get out of there, there's a narrow road through the woods, and there was a wounded soldier in the middle of the road. So I had to go and get him so he wouldn't block the Jeep. So I watched the Jeep driver move the gear shift lever to move the Jeep, and I took 2 steps towards this soldier that was wounded, and I watched the Jeep driver get hit from a direct hit, landed right in his lap, the artillery shell, and he was blown to bits. The Jeep was destroyed, and I was hit by that same shell that hit him. Hit me in the hand and in the back and knocked me down. And then there were many, many more wounded. So I had a good right hand was okay. So I treated soldiers with my good hand and my teeth, bandaged to stop the bleeding of guys. And then when the Germans stopped their artillery shell, our infantry then went into attack to get them. And so I was able to walk. So I was going to walk back behind the lines where there would be an aid station with a doctor, be probably about a mile behind the action. So I started to walk back there towards that aid station where there'd be a doctor. And a big truck stopped and said, "Would you like a ride to the aid station?" I said, "Yes." So I got in, and he drove me to the aid station and said, "Here's the aid station." So I got out and thanked him, and the doctor there bandaged my hand and my back, and then I was put on an airplane and flown to England to a hospital. But it was 2 days prior to that, we had liberated the Dachau concentration camp that the Germans used to kill the Jews. And our unit liberated that camp. I was the 5th American through the gate, and I got inside, and I was sitting on the top of a cistern, which is like a sewer cover, and I felt something around my feet, and I looked up, and there was a German woman, prisoner, kissing my shoes. I couldn't help it but cry. I helped her get up, gave her a hug, and she walked away. But that was my experience with the Jewish prisoners in the concentration camp.
What do you remember seeing in Dachau?
Skinny, hungry people that were just skin and bone, and stacks of, like cordwood, of bodies, dead bodies, just stacked up in the camp. waiting to be put into the furnaces. The smell was terrible. It was unbelievable that anyone could do such a thing to another human being as they did in the.
How long did you spend in the camp?
Just half a day we spent, and then we moved out. And then we understand that the next day, General Eisenhower made the civilians in the town of Dachau, he forced them to go into the camp to see, because they didn't believe that the Nazis were actually doing what they were doing. I couldn't understand why they couldn't know that, the smell of the burning bodies, and so they didn't want to believe it. But that was a good idea for Eisenhower, to make the civilians see what was happening, for sure, to be ashamed of it.
When you were in combat, were you taking on more small arms or artillery fire?
Artillery, more so than small arms.
Do you have instances where you were under small arms fire?
Oh yes, there would be firefights with rifles and some, hand grenades and so on. Like with machine guns, capturing machine gun nests of Germans and so on, where they would all be done with small arms.
Describe to me, what's it like to have bullets going around you?
Frightening. You don't know what to do. You don't know where to hide, there isn't any place to hide. And you just totally frightened, and hope. You just hope that you pray a lot. I prayed an awful lot.
What would you pray for?
I had a prayer that I would say, "Be with me, Lord, because I'm in trouble." I would say that frequently.
And when people are trying to kill you and bullets are going around you, do you make an effort to squirm and move your body, or do you just try to put it out of your mind that people are shooting at you?
Oh no, you squirm, and you try to make yourself as small as possible, or if there's any thing solid at all that you can get between their firearms and you. If you get something solid between you and a rifle, you're pretty safe, but not with artillery. Artillery, the shell explodes and particles of it travel over 300 miles an hour. And if they hit flesh, they take it with them.
What were the most common type of wounds that you would be treating?
It would be wounds to the body. The torso itself would be in the guts, and more so than say legs or arms. And there would be so many of them at once that you wanted to treat, and you do the best you could by stopping the bleeding, make sure they're breathing, and go to the next guy who's yelling for you.
What kind of things are you telling the wounded men as you're treating them?
You're going to be okay, I'd say it to them. You're going to be okay. I got the bleeding stopped. You're going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay.
And what would they be saying?
They wouldn't just, yeah, they didn't know if they should believe me or not, but they were glad to see me.
And you would tell that to the men regardless of how severe the wound was?
Yes. Mm-hmm. In fact, years later, say 20 years later, we have an Army reunion. There would be, at the reunion, there was like a bulletin board for if you wanted to see a particular soldier that you hadn't seen since you were in the service, you'd read your name on there or something. So I would read my name on there that somebody was looking for me. And it was a guy that I had taken care of, and he wanted to thank me. And so that happened 12, 15 times. Guys thanking me for saving them, stopping the bleeding, and so on. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is in the wooded area, when there's artillery, if the artillery shell hits a tree, it shatters the tree and pieces of wood become missiles. And if they are into the skin, it can be a worse wound than the metal, because the slivers, it's difficult for the doctor to get all those slivers out of the the wound and so on. So they call that a tree burst, where the artillery shell hits the tree and bursts it into a bunch of slivers.
So as a medic, what do you do when someone has tree in them?
Well, that you just bandage.
But do you pull it out?
No, because you could make it worse by pulling it out. It takes no, it makes it worse.
With the men who had stomach wounds, how are you supposed to help them?
Oh, there would be intestines hanging out, and you'd put them back into the body and try to put a bandage over the hole, stop the bleeding, tell them that they were going to be okay, and that's not true.
The men with the stomach wounds, more often than not, they would die?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you actually, with your bare hand, you'll take the guts and you'll put it back?
Put it back in, yeah.
I mean, is it usually like that exposed? Like, I know Hollywood movies, gore it up oftentimes.
Yeah.
But in reality, is it often like that exposed, or is it?
Yeah. But the intestines would be out, of the wound, but the intestine is all ripped up too, because the artillery shell also tore that, and so you hoping that you can get the thing all bandaged up so that when it gets to a doctor, the doctor then can do some suturing and sewing and stuff like that.
Now, medics are supposed to be exempt from getting killed in combat.
Yeah.
Did the Germans follow that?
No. We were targeted.
Is that hearsay, or you know that for a fact?
I know that for a fact. I was sitting on the ground taking care of a wounded man, and the medics wore a helmet with a red cross on the sides of the helmet. Some of them had a white cross. That was to show the Germans that we were non-combat. And the guy was shooting at me. So I laid down alongside this fellow that I was treating until the guy stopped. Then I sat up and took care of him. There were other things that the medic had to do. For example, any time that the unit, the company, would break for a rest or for whatever, the important thing in an infantry man is his feet. So anytime we would have a break, I would go around checking guys' feet for blisters. So that was part of my job. And I would go around to up to 200 guys, say, "How's your feet today?" "Oh, I got a couple blisters." "Okay, I'll take care. Take your shoes off. I'll take care." And that's what I would do during a break, and they would be me just resting, having a smoke.
you go to the aid station?
I would go to the aid station like every other day for supplies.
What kind of supplies does the combat medic need?
Well, I need, of course, bandages, morphine, that's about all. Tape. That's about all. Didn't take any. The only medicine I had with me would be morphine. If I gave a wounded man morphine, I put the letter M, write it on his forehead, so that when he saw a doctor, the doctor would know that and wouldn't overdose him with morphine. And if I used a tourniquet, I put the letter T in the forehead so that they would look for a tourniquet on an arm or a leg or something, because that has to be released every 20 seconds or every 20 minutes.
What are you writing this in?
Pardon?
The M and the T, what are you writing it in?
The iodine. We didn't have magic markers then, so they had iodine little, what do they call them? They were a glass tube that was wrapped in a gauze, and you break them, and it causes the iodine to come out. So they mark an M with the iodine or the T.
Talk to me about the psyche of a combat medic when the riflemen are taking on artillery and small arms fire, and it's just hell out there. What motivates you to stick your neck out and actually go into the hell and try to help people despite knowing very well that you could get killed just like that? What motivates you to actually go do that?
What motivated me was to be a good soldier, like I was trained to do the job that I was trained to do. I just wanted to be a good soldier and wanted you see the pleading look on the guy's eyes that are wounded. You know, they're bleeding and they're afraid they're going to die, and they're with their eyes, they're pleading for you to help them, save them. And so it just loyalty to the team, my job was to take care of the wounded. The guy that got wounded, his job was to kill the enemy.
Did you ever treat German
Yes,
wounded?
yeah.
Tell me about that, please.
There was a German officer and a German army truck, and the army truck had the hood up, and two soldiers were like working on the engine while trying to get this truck moving, and this officer was standing guard alongside. An American rifleman saw that, and he said, "I'm going to get that bastard." And he got down on one knee, the American Army soldier did, and he aimed, and he shot that officer in the penis. And I got over to him, and he was bleeding. I mean, because there's a lot of blood in that area anyway. And he was laying on his back, and he kind of looked up and he says, "Kaput." I said, "Yeah, alles kaput. You're not going to be a daddy." Because he had his penis shot off by this American on purpose. Bleeding, boy, I'm telling you, I had difficulty stopping the bleeding. And but yet, I said he had it coming to him. He started the war. The Germans did.
Now,
by war rules, a medic treats both enemy and non-enemy. You treat everybody, regardless.
Was it rare? Was it rare for someone you were treating to die, or was it pretty common?
No, there was some of them that I knew were dying, were going to die, but
What made you feel that way?
I just had hope, that I would be able to save them. Usually, if a soldier was dying, besides medics, there were chaplains. And they would come too, the chaplains would, to pray over the ones that were badly wounded and dying and so on. And so frequently I would say bandage up a wounded soldier and go over to another one, and the chaplain would come and say a prayer over the, you knew that he had died.
Under fire, the chaplain would do this?
Yeah. Yeah, they were in the same situation as the medics. They weren't allowed to have any weapons, and neither were we by the rules of war.
Did you carry a weapon, though?
No.
Did you know medics who did?
Yeah, I knew that small arms, knife, brass knuckles. Once in a while, if we were moving across territory to go to another area and there wasn't any action, but we were walking, maybe we were going to walk 10, 12 miles. I'd be walking along and there was a soldier with his rifle and his own, and so I'd say to him, hey, you want me to carry your rifle for you for a while? You know, because they're heavy. So I would take it and I'd carry it when it was in a safe area, pretty much, and maybe I'd carry his rifle for him for 20 minutes to a half hour and then give it back to him.
Did you feel like Sergeant York?
Yeah.
Tell me, was it common for the men already to be dead by the time you got to them?
For who to be dead?
Was it common for some of the soldiers to already be dead by the time you get to them to treat them?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's surprising the number that get killed. You know, in say, there's about 200 men in a company, and if they get attacked in artillery, you're going to end up with probably 12, 15 guys dead out of the 200. And so you treat them and hope that they aren't one of the 15, you know. Regardless, if you think they're dead or not, you still treat them.
What do you mean? If guys weren't moving, you would treat them?
Yeah. Hoping that they were just unconscious, you know.
What if a guy was like completely torn apart? You would still?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I never knew that. The medics who I've talked to in the past, they would always. My understanding is that you would just go up to a soldier, see if they have a pulse. And then if they don't, you move on.
No, I didn't test for pulse. I would test other ways, to poke them maybe in the rib to see if they would, you know, jump or something like that, or talk to them. But I never felt for a pulse.
Yeah.
I just hoped that they all were going to live. But
but if someone was decapitated, you wouldn't go do that. You wouldn't help them, of course. No. But the guys who you just couldn't tell, you still treat.
Right.
It's better be safe than sorry.
Yes.
Being a medic is a stressful job. How are you able to mentally... How are you able to stay healthy mentally when it's always life and death? When men die that you treat, do you take that upon yourself?
No, I never did, but I never felt that there was anything that I did or did not do that caused the death. It was just what I did saved the life.
Did you get this feeling more recently, or even during the war you felt like this?
During the war, yeah. Well, the first time we were in a combat area situation, I realized, hey, this is serious. You know, there's guys being wounded and shot, and This isn't pretend anymore like it was in Louisiana or Texas, where we did some training.
Were you buddies with any of these men? Did you get close?
Well, yeah, I got pretty close to several of them.
Well, I'm just asking because you were in a medical battalion, and I know that you were assigned to M Company, but did you try to keep your distance, or some of the men?
No, I became a member of the M Company. Even though I was the medic,
You were M Company.
M Company, yeah. But I was the medic M Company. It would be like the machine gunner of M Company. You know, it would.
I'm trying to think. M Company's heavy weapons, right?
M Company? M Company was considered a heavy weapons company, which meant 50 caliber machine guns and or water cooled machine guns, 81 millimeter mortars, which are this big around and this tall. You know, that was a M Company, heavy weapons.
So how far back is heavy weapons versus the rifle companies?
Oh, probably 50 to 100 yards.
That's it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But artillery, that doesn't make a difference at all?
No,
Were there certain strategies that you adopted quickly when it comes to quickly treating someone and effectively doing it?
Did it what?
Were there any strategies that you quickly adopted?
Oh, no. Each person, each wound was different. You know, they treat it differently. The only key was really stop the bleeding and hope that when I would see guys that hadn't been wounded yet or anything, but running across the field or something during artillery attack, hope they didn't get hit in the face. That was one thing that frightened infantrymen, was being wounded in the face, so that when they went home after the war, they didn't want to frighten children. That was really a concern that they had, you know.
You felt this, or they shared this?
They shared it. Had guys that had their chins blown off. I did a tracheotomy laying on my stomach.
Tell me about that.
This soldier had been hit in the jaw with a piece of artillery and took his jaw off, and it blocked his throat, so he couldn't breathe. So I was being shot at too. So I was laying on my stomach and cutting a hole in his throat, and then I had a fountain pen. I don't know if you're too young to know what a fountain pen is, but
What's
a fountain pen is.
I know what a fountain pen is.
Okay, it has a hollow body on the outside, and I cut the one end off that had a black, and stuck that into the throat, into the hole that I made for the tracheotomy, and taped it to his neck so that he could breathe through that. And while I'm laying on my stomach, because if I sat up, I'd be too big a target. But I wasn't the only one that did that. There were several guys that did that same thing.
What was the terrain like? Because you guys fought, it was in, I guess, from, I guess you could say, is like the western part of Germany in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what's the terrain like over there?
Well, there was when we were up near the Ruhr Valley, where there was a town. I can't think of the town. It's like Detroit was, or Pittsburgh. They had steel mills and so on. They built heavy equipment and so on. We captured that town. That was flat because it was in a valley, kind of the river valley. Then when we were near the end of we were going towards Munich, coming into the mountainous area there, and we would walk over hills up and then back down again. Gee. Walk.
What do you remember about the crossing of the Rhine River?
Well, when I was in a truck, and we were being convoyed from one area to another, and the leader of the convoy.
All right, sir. Talk to me. What does a combat medic do when the outfit that you're supporting goes into a town? Are you up with them, or are you at the back while they're going through the town?
No, I'm with them. Usually, they're ahead of me. You know, like I bring up the rear, kind of, so that I can see all of them. And we go into a town and capture a town, or we would. One time we captured a town and we were given orders to stay overnight, that another unit was going to come and take our place. So we confiscated private homes. We told the civilians they had to get out of their homes, and so we would sleep in the house overnight. And something that's kind of a humorous story is that the house that I was going to stay in had running water and a hot water heater. So we thought, well, while we're here, we'll take baths. But what good is a bath if you don't have clean underwear to put on? Well, up the street, about a block, was a store, a dry goods store. So some of the guys went up there to get clean underwear from the store. So I decided to go and get some. So at that time, I had a 32-inch waist, and the only underwear I could find would be 48-inch, 50, 54, or something. So that wouldn't do. So I thought, well, I'll go over to the ladies' department. And I found a pair of ladies' underpants that were like sweatshirt material. And I triumphantly brought them back to that house. I took my bath and put those clean panties on. 2 days later, I got wounded. And I'm in this hospital, and this private is cutting my uniform off of me. And I said, why are you cutting my uniform off? He said, I'm looking for more wounds. I thought, oh, geez, he's going to find out of what I'm wearing. So anyway, everything's taken care of. The next morning, I'm in this tent, laying on a cot, and 3 nurses came in. And I heard one of them say, where's the guy that was wearing women's panties? Well, you can be sure I did. Oh, here I am over here. I didn't say that. I hid myself. I pulled the blanket up over my head. A little embarrassed to be caught wearing women's underwear.
Well, what did the guy say when he was cutting your clothes and he saw it?
Shit, he said.
Did you explain it to him?
No. No, I didn't explain it to anybody.
Tell me, talk to me about the problem of snipers.
I didn't have any problem with snipers. Our unit didn't.
Really? You guys never took on,
no.
Where you were, you never took on sniper fire?
No. I can't remember any of that, no.
What about, did you have any interaction with German tanks?
Yeah. Yeah, usually tank against tank. American tanks against their tanks.
Did you see this happen?
Yes.
What do you remember about that?
They had probably better tanks than we did, but the reason that we were able to outbeat them was we had more tanks. For every one that they got destroyed of theirs, they had 2 to replace it. Every tank of ours that was destroyed, we had 5 to replace it. So it was the numbers that we were able to, win tank wars.
But the men you were with, did you guys ever take on tank fire?
Yeah, it was used as artillery. They would fire a howitzer or like
a howitzer.
Another time though, this is a true story. There were 3 of us guys in this house in Germany, and a tank, German tank, came up down the street and stopped right in front of the house. And one of the guys inside, American, stupid infantryman, he said he saw the captain of the tank stick his head up out of the turret. He says, "I'll pick him off." He said, "Come on, don't. You got a big artillery piece on that tank." So, sure enough, here this gun comes around, aiming right at the house. And so we're all running to the back of the house. I dove through a window to the back. Boom! They fired this tank, fired this gun, and blew a hole in the house. And my one of the guys yelling, "I'm hit! I'm hit! I'm hit!" I said, "You didn't hit. Got hit in the ass with a brick. So you're okay." But that, if we had stayed near the front of the house, we probably, at least two of us would have been killed from that tank firing into the house. And then it moved on. The tank did. It was satisfied with firing one round.
Were there any instances in which you were strafed by the German Luftwaffe?
Yes.
What do you remember about that?
Almost every night, around 10 o'clock, we call them 10 o'clock Charlie. He would come and strafe us. A single plane. Come in and strafe, fly around, And almost every night, the same time. Bed check Charlie is what we called him. And one time we were being convoyed in trucks to another area, and here comes a strafe plane behind us to strafe the convoy. So the truck stopped, and everybody piled out of the trucks into ditches and so on. And there were some houses there. Some of the guys went into the houses to hide. Well, the planes that were strafing didn't do much damage, didn't kill anybody. And some of the guys that had run into the houses for protection, when they came out, they had blankets. And the German civilians were yelling at them for stealing the blankets from them. But yeah, there would be scheduled strafing almost every night.
Did your unit have any interaction with German mines?
Yes. Yep. And they would be placed in front of machine gun nests or even buildings in a town. They might be in the front yard, some of them. They would, the guys that with the mine detectors would go in ahead of time, with the detectors to find out where they were.
Did you have to treat any men who had stepped on mines?
No, I never did.
So
they had a special mine. They called it a pop-up or
Bouncing Betty?
Huh?
Bouncing Betty?
Yeah. It would bounce up about 30 inches high and then explode. And it wasn't intended to kill. It was intended to wound, so that you'd be, you'd lose the want to fight, and so on, because you might be castrated by it. And that was the purpose of that.
What do you remember about the crossing of the Danube River?
We went by rowboat. We had captured some Germans, and we had about 5 rowboats, and they would row the boat across the Danube with maybe 8 or 9 guys in the boat, and then they'd have to row it back to pick up another group, and that's how we crossed the Danube, by rowboats.
Were you taking on fire when crossing?
No.
I'm going to read you off some names of towns, and please just tell me if you remember anything about it. Cologne, Germany.
Cologne. Isn't that where the church was destroyed? I think we drove through it on a truck. and saw the damage to the building.
Ibn Shazin?
Didn't get there.
Aderdorn?
No,
Ansbach?
no.
Eichstatt?
I think we've been there. Yeah.
What do you remember about Eichstatt?
We were walking over a hill, high hill, had to get up over the hill to get into, and there was a soldier ahead of me, about two guys ahead of me, and he had on an apron that held artillery shells in pockets, two in the front, two in the back. And all he did was complain about how heavy those shells were. They were mortar shells, actually. And he said, oh boy, if I have to continue carrying these, I'm going to throw them away. Well, he did. He took one and he threw it because he said it was too heavy. Well, two men behind me was a battalion commander, lieutenant colonel, and he saw that happen. And he said to the sergeant, Rutgers, Sergeant, when we have an opportunity, arrest that man. He just threw a shell away that could save 200 men's lives. We heard later on that the guy who threw that shell away got 10 years at Leavenworth.
No.
Yeah.
Do you believe that?
I don't know that this was the story.
But do you believe it?
Well, I believe that he probably got some prison time because it was treachery.
What do you remember about Ingolstadt?
You know, the guys talk about it at the reunion, but I don't remember it.
Do you remember anything about crossing the Isar River?
No.
What do you remember about the Mittel-Isar Canal?
I don't know anything about that.
Do you know anything about the Amper Canal?
No.
Do you remember anything about Wasserburg?
No.
Salzburg?
No. Salzburg?
Yeah.
You mean the music city?
Well, I have a division history here, and it's just telling me that the 86th went to Salzburg on May 2nd.
I wasn't there on May 2nd.
Oh, that's right, you were wounded.
On the 29th.
That's why. Typically, as a combat medic, after you patch up a man, are you part of the litter bearer team that's bringing him back, or who are the litter bearers?
No, that's a different crew that comes up. They were called the Graves Registration. They were called. They come up to pick up the wounded and the dead after the battle is over with. You know, they come up with ambulances and so on, pick up the dead bodies and then also the wounded and put them in ambulances, drive them forward to the doctor.
When men were hurt in combat, you know, movies portray them as crying for their mothers, but in reality, the men who are seriously wounded, what are they saying?
They didn't say much at all. If they couldn't see the wound, you know, too well, they might ask, "How bad is it?" You know, that's, or do I still have a leg, or you know, something like that.
But before you even get to them, you know, you told me men are calling out medic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are they ever saying anything else, or that's only what you like? You don't hear guys calling for their mothers, do you?
No.
So that's never. Hollywood.
I never heard anybody calling for their mother.
And tell me then, what was the happy experience? Was it the underwear incident? Is that what you were going to tell me about?
Well, that was funny. That was, to me, that was funny.
You were
no. Okay, the experience I had. I was wounded, and I was at a field hospital waiting my turn to see the doctor to, you know, sew up my hand or whatever he was going to do. And I'm laying there on this litter or stretcher, and a nurse came over to me and she said, "How you doing, soldier?" And I said, "I'm okay." She says, your face is dirty. Let me wash it for you. It'll make you feel better. That was the most wonderful thing that anybody could do for me. She washed my face for me, and I thought, my mom would have done that. Wow, is that wonderful, you know? Well, about 5 years ago, I know this nurse that works at the hospital down the street, and I told her that story. She says, and she's a nurse, she said, that can't be taught. That comes from the heart. What that nurse did, you know, washing my face to make me feel better. And she said that's what nursing is all about, is to make the patient feel better. But I thought, wow, she's going to wash my face. Was that wonderful? My mom would have done that. I was 19 at the time.
In an average week, when you were in the combat zone, are you guys getting into actual firefights and taking on bombardments? Not every day, are you? Or is it like a couple times in set? Like, I'm just trying to get a better understanding. How often would you actually get in these intense combat situations?
Oh, maybe once every 3 or 4 days.
And what are you doing in the other days?
No, There would be so many times when you're digging a hole to get into. You know, they haven't fired at you yet, but you dig an awful lot of holes when you're infantry, you know, to get into.
Now, as a combat medic, how are you deciding who to go to first when guys are getting hit everywhere?
Closest.
Is that the strategy?
Yeah. Unless you could see which was serious, you know, more serious than others, and one that you could actually do something to save or something.
And most of the time when you're performing on the men, are you guys in a wooded area or is it usually open terrain?
Could be either. I've been in both. Open, and I've been in a wooded area.
So when you're out in the open, are you dragging the wounded man to an area where you might have some cover so you can...
No, it's right out in the open.
I don't understand how you are able to operate, or, you know, how are you able to dress someone's wounds out in the open,
I know,
without feeling like someone's going to kill you?
You did it. Yeah. I was afraid that I was going to get hit, you know, every time.
How loud was the artillery when it's going off around you?
Oh, man, alive. It's well, you've witnessed fireworks. The explosions are extremely loud, and the artillery shell breaks into pieces, and the pieces fly 300 miles an hour, for crying out loud, through the air, and when they hit something, boy, they do some damage, you know.
And you're telling me the more common wounds that you got were in the torso area versus arms and legs?
Yeah. And I don't know why that was bigger target or something, but...
Well, it's interesting because I guess the guys who I've spoken to that were in the earlier part of the war, they always mention that arms and legs are the more common type. But I think that's because they had more small arms fired.
Could be, yeah.
But I guess artillery, what's the difference between an artillery shell that hits the ground and an airburst?
Well, the one that hits the ground not only sends up artillery pieces, but stones and gravel and stuff from the, you know, at high speed too, and they do some damage, whatever was on the ground. For example, when I got hit, they cleaned stuff out of my hand, you know, because that's what where I got hit in the hand. They cleaned gravel out of my hand, and the shell that hit me hit that Jeep driver alone, and I don't know where it got the gravel piece, you know, but there was pieces of gravel, and also there was the doctors asked me if I was wearing wool knit gloves. At the time, I said, no, I wasn't. Why? well, we found some wool knit material in your. And then the next day, well, the Jeep driver was wearing a sweater. And that's probably where that came from.
Did you see the explosion from the Jeep driver, or you actually saw the shell?
Well, you can't see the shell flying. You can hear it.
Uh-huh.
You can hear it go through the air, but you can't see it. It's traveling too fast.
I mean, but when that incident happened, was it like slow motion, or it just happened really quick?
So really quick. Yeah.
So
almost instantly.
Was it a mortar or an artillery shell, do you think?
It was artillery.
So he got a direct hit from artillery shell, hits him in the lap. He's blown to nothing.
Right.
And that shrapnel hit you.
Yeah.
How bad was the hand injury?
How what?
How bad, how severe was your hand
Well,
injury?
all the bones here were blown out.
Put your hand up for me.
And the tendons were cut, and a lot of flesh was gone. And when I went to the hospital in England, they looked at it and they said, we're thinking of cutting it off at the wrist. Mm-hmm. But then there was a doctor that wrote the book on hand plastic surgery, and they called him in for his opinion. And he said, well, there's nothing wrong with the thumb. If you can fix the rest of the hand, then he can grasp things with the thumb. So they rebuilt my hand by harvesting bone from my hip to replace the metacarpals in here. They harvested tendons from my right leg, but they didn't work properly. Skin from my thigh for 2 skin grafts here. So 28 months I was in the hospital as a patient.
For the hand?
Yeah. I had 15 operations on my hand and 11 on my leg. And 1 on my back where I got hit by a piece in the base of my neck too, a piece of artillery. And that's still there. They didn't take that out because they said it was too close to the spine, and doctor said, I'm not getting in there with anything sharp. He said, I'll leave it there, and he said, it won't bother you. And it hasn't bothered me in 75 years.
When you were a combat medic, when you're dealing with someone and they're all bloody from the wound, your hands get bloody.
Yeah.
Do you do anything with your hands between one soldier and the next?
No. No rubber gloves, no nothing, just bloody hands.
No disinfectant?
No.
So the blood from one soldier, very possibly...
On another one, in the wound too. Yeah. No, we didn't have anything to disinfect our hands.
So at the end of the day, or after the combat was over, how do you get your hands clean?
Well, find some water in our canteen, and spill it out. That's about all.
Did you see men get yellow in combat or get shell shock?
Yeah.
What do you remember about that?
Well, they had a fellow that in basic training, he was one of the better soldiers. He got promoted rapidly. The very first artillery attack by the Germans, he laid in the ground in the fetal position and just cried. He was so frightened that he couldn't handle it. He was a combat medic too, but he couldn't handle the artillery, and he wasn't hit, but it was the possibility of being, hit, wounded him, that he just could not handle it. And
all the wounded men that you attend to, are you giving them all morphine, or is it only some cases you give morphine?
Well, the morphine that we had was a measured dose. They were in a little, like a toothpaste tube, but maybe about this long, with the needle on the end with the cap. And you just take the cap off and jab them and squeeze, and that gives them the morphine. But it's already measured an amount, so that you don't give them too much or not enough.
But are you giving it to everyone, regardless of the wound?
No, not to everyone. Anybody with a head injury, you didn't give them one. You didn't give them morphine.
Did you have head injuries?
Oh yeah. there were wounds in the head. Yeah.
But what would be a head injury without death?
Oh, maybe just a bullet, or maybe the chin was almost knocked off, by artillery piece.
But you didn't have guys up here who would get
No,
wounded.
no.
They'd be dead.
Yeah. No, if it was deep. No, but there would be wounds in the face, chin.
Did you guys use alcohol to clean the wounds?
No.
No?
Didn't have any method of carrying all that stuff.
Do you feel, hypothetically speaking, do you feel a lot of the soldiers died from infection?
I don't even think about it.
No, what I'm saying, like just from your experiences, just overall in World War II, do you think a lot of soldiers would have died from infection?
Probably. Some of them not serious infections, serious wounds, yeah.
And as a combat medic, are you taking care of the men without flesh wounds, like if they're sick or with the flu, or?
Yeah.
How are you helping them?
Well, we would be able to get them aspirin, some medicines, penicillin. We had access to sulfa as a germ fighter, stuff like that.
And when you help the men with the feet, you're actually rubbing their feet?
Their feet?
You told me you would go check guys'
Yeah,
feet.
yeah, yeah.
What, you're trying to get the circulation there?
No, if they'd have a blister on their foot, we'd break the blister because it was full of fluid, and that's what was sore. We'd break it, and then we'd bandage it, and they'd go on,
When a combat medic goes down, is it true that they become the first priority? Like, my understanding was, well, you're out in the field with other medics and other riflemen.
Yeah.
But if a medic gets hurt, you stop what you're doing and you go help the medic.
In combat? No. I didn't put a priority on that.
Were you the only medic assigned to M Company?
Yeah.
There was only one of you?
One up for 200 guys, yeah. I was the only medic with M Company.
Did guys try to get close to you and so that if they got hurt, you would help them?
Yeah, because any time that, say we would be in assembly out in the field, and the officer would say, "All right, men, let's head out." You'd hear guys, "Where's the medic? Where's the medic? I want him next to me." They'd want me close by in case they needed me.
But how would they? I mean, how would you choose? You would just go to whoever.
I just followed the whole gang.
Do you remember any of the names of your buddies that were killed overseas?
No. No.
Were most of them young? I mean, the guys you were serving with?
Oh yeah, they were 19, 20, 21. There were some sergeants would be older, in their 30s maybe, or late 20s.
When you came home from the war after your rehab, was it difficult readjusting to civilian life?
No. I didn't think it was.
Loud
I was ready for. See, I married while I was in the service. I had a year to go after I got married, and so when I got discharged, we had a child. Her. She was, born when I got discharged, and I had to find a job. So I got a job in a factory. And I said, after about a year or so, to my wife, "There's got to be a better way of earning a living than working in a factory. I'm going to go to school on the GI Bill." So I went to college on the GI Bill and got a degree in education. And in the meantime, when I got my degree, we had 3 children. So I started a family, you know.
But I meant, did loud noises bother you when you came home?
The what?
Loud noises, did they bother you?
No.
I know cars back then backfired a lot.
No, my wife said that I did some dreaming and that I would be threshing, in bed, and she'd try to wake me up and say, "You're hitting me,"
What life advice do you want to give to future generations?
Love one another. Don't try to be better than another. Fight for equality so that everybody is the same. We have too much people protesting, and even in foreign countries are trying to outdo each other. And why is that so important, to be better than someone else? Why can't we just fight for equality? We're all, equal. We all deserve the same thing, and regardless of our background or our race, our religion, our ethnicity. I think that's, what happened at Charlottesville, for crying out loud. People there carrying Nazi flags, protesting the blacks. Why? Skin color is just the only difference. There's no difference between me and a black guy except our skin color. We're equal. But I don't know.
Does it make you sad looking at the state of affairs today?
Yes, it does. And that idiot with the weird haircut over in North Korea, he doesn't realize that what he's doing could bring on Armageddon to the nation. If he keeps threatening, it could be the end of North Korea. If you agitate us enough, we can destroy them with what we have. And I don't want that to happen. Those people that live there don't deserve that.
If you were to give me some wisdom for my life based on your experiences in World War II, what would you tell me?
Love one another. Find what is good from other people. You will be able to find something in everybody that is good. Look for that rather than for what is bad and something, what's wrong with that person. No, what's good about that person, and praise that. It's a shame. We have a black man that's one of the chefs here, the cook. Extremely intelligent man, very intelligent. And he comes in the morning at breakfast, and we'll carry on a conversation about something, and he's fascinating to listen to, And other people don't like him because of his skin color. What does that have to do with him as a person?
What would you want all the men who were killed overseas in World War II, if you could say something to them, what would you want them to know? Or what would you want to say to them?
I wish what you did was not in vain, that it resulted in good for your sacrifice. And I thank you for your sacrifice.
You feel like a lot of the guys, I should click. Do you feel the men who were killed overseas died in vain?
I think some of them did, yes. Some of them who, there were some there that didn't know even why they were there. You know, they were just a number, because we had to have numbers.
Are you afraid of death?
Yes, I was. I'm not now. I was. I don't know if I was afraid of death so much whenever there would be it was artillery attacks more than firefights that bothered me, but I think I was more frightened of being disabled rather than killed. You know, then dependent upon someone, and if I'm disabled, I'm now dependent upon someone else helping me, which I didn't want. I wanted to be able to take care of myself, so I had a fear. I have to say that I did. I had a fear.
You're not afraid of death now?
Not now. I'm not. No.
Why not?
I just think I'm ready for death. I try to live by the rules. And hopefully I pleased my master.
What do you believe happens when someone dies?
Well, when someone dies, well, I think that they go, I don't know exactly where, somewhere for judgment, and they're judged according to the way they lived, you know, and they either will be rewarded or condemned or something, you know. But that has to be pretty serious to be condemned, I believe. You know, somebody like Hitler or Stalin, those kind of people. The ordinary guy who cheats on his income tax, I don't think is going to go to hell. But
what would you say to someone who's afraid of death?
I don't know. I don't know what I would say.
Because I'm afraid of death, and
you are?
Of course. I don't want to die.
Because you like what you're living, right? You like your living here. And you don't know what it's going to be like when you're dead.
I think a lot of my fear is that I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want there to be nothing.
Yeah.
I don't understand how you are able to get over that.
I don't know. It doesn't bother me. I know it's all going to come to an end someday, you know.
But you do believe there's a heaven?
Oh yeah, I do. That there's a reward. Yeah.
Sir, what kind of person do you want to be remembered as?
Honest, generous, loving, that's good enough.
I can guarantee with my limited interaction of knowing you that there's no doubt people would remember you like that. You come across in all those ways.
I want to.
You seem like a very good man who's helped a lot of people.
Yeah.
And
that's why here, if you talk to somebody that knows me here, you know, you say, do you know Ted Klapperich? Yeah, he's the guy, whenever I ask him how is it, he's always happy. He's the guy you say, how are you today? Happy? I'm happy. So he's the happy guy. Because I want you to be happy. That's why I'm happy, to make you happy.
And I know you feel like a lot of the horrific things that you went through and the fact that a lot of guys were killed overseas was in vain. And I'm not trying to dispute that, but I do want you to see that you've given a lot of people a chance at life. And I would not be sitting here. And I'm not trying to be all high and mighty, but I mean this very literally, that 75 years after World War II, you've given this 19-year-old kid from California an opportunity to live his life. And no matter what happens, I'm never going to forget you, nor your sacrifices.
Yeah.
I thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you for giving me this.
Were you in Detroit during the 1943 riots?
I was in the Army.
So you weren't at Detroit?
No.
Okay, when you were wounded, where did they keep you in the hospital? I mean, where, after you were wounded, where did they send you?
They sent me to England, and I was in a hospital in England for a month. Then they shipped me back to the United States on a hospital ship. And I was put in a hospital in Cleveland, Ohio. And I spent a year there. Then they closed that hospital and moved us all over to Battle Creek, Michigan. And I spent a year and a half there as patient.
Got it. So you spent most of your rehab time in the U.S.?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever regain the full functionality of your hand?
No. Nope.
Did you overcome that, or that always bothered you?
Never bothered me. It didn't.
Is there anything that you were not able to do because of that injury?
No, I played golf, played baseball.
Okay. Did you smoke in the service?
Yes.
How often?
Daily. I smoked for 20 years, from age 20 to age 40. And when I was 40, my middle daughter was about 10 or 11, and I lit up a cigarette at home, and she said to me, "Daddy, I can hardly wait till I'm old enough to smoke." That was it. I quit. I didn't want her to smoke, so she never smoked.
Some veterans told me that Americans did not always take prisoners. Did you ever witness that?
Yeah. Yeah. One night, we had captured 3 Germans, and we were walking along this road on either side of the road and along the shoulder, like 5 yards apart. And these, I think there were 3 German soldiers down the middle of the road that, as captured, they went to the back of our gang, and we heard some shooting back there. And the word came, the prisoners were trying to escape, so we shot them. Then the word the next day was that the soldiers that were supposed to be guarding them said it was too much problem, to hell with it, I'll kill them, as they were prisoners. Now, I don't know how true that is or not.
I think it's true.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you saw a dead German soldier?
Yeah. It was a colonel, a woman. A man, I mean, not a woman, a man. High up. He was laying in the field, when shot.
Do you remember where?
What part of the body? It was in the chest. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the first time you saw a dead American soldier?
Yeah. I thought, my God, he didn't deserve this. Why him?
But where was he hit?
He was hit in the chest by a bullet. And he was a nice guy.
Oh, you knew him?
Yeah, I knew him.
So you didn't see like a dead American on the side of the road before you guys got in combat. Your first dead soldier was someone you knew.
Yeah.
What's that like, knowing someone one day and the next day them being killed?
Oh man, you just wonder who's next. You know, somebody's going to be next, but who?
What would happen to the bodies when they stayed out? Is it true that they would bloat?
I never saw a human bloat, but I saw a horse one time that had been dead for I don't know how long. It was bloated, and it was at night. We were walking into this town, and I jumped off the street into like a ditch, and I hit something, and my foot went through the hide of the horse, right in, like, because it was bloated, and my foot I took my foot out, had all that crap on over my shoe. And
you mentioned that Dachau had a smell.
Yeah.
What would you describe the smell as?
Burning flesh.
Did you see the ovens? Were they still?
Oh yeah, saw the ovens.
What do you remember about the ovens?
Just how they looked like they were used so often. You know, there were about 8 of them, and they just had like assembly line, you know. And then they had over in one part of the building, the room, was these bodies stacked up like cordwood, waiting their turn to be burned, you know, cremated.
Did you guys give food to the prisoners?
No, we were told before we got to Dachau that the prisoners would beg us for food. But we were not to give them food because their stomachs couldn't handle the kind of food that we had. It would be too rich for them. And that the U.S. Army would be providing nutrition experts to feed them food that their stomachs could handle and still would be nutritious for them. You know, because it had to be a gradual new growth in their stomachs and so on. You know.
What was the toughest thing you had to do in combat?
The toughest thing to do in combat would be had to leave a leg over to one side. And I don't know why I didn't think that the doctors could sew it back on, but it was smashed. The bone was in splinters, you know. And I had to get to some other guys. I was in a hurry. And then sometimes, too, there would be a series of wounded guys, and they would be pleading for help, you know. They want to be treated first. I didn't blame them, you know, but I was the only one, just me, and there was about 11 guys that needed help. Yeah, during an artillery attack, within 6 or 7 minutes, there'd be at least 4 guys yelling for me, you know, that were hit.
Now, when you mentioned the leg incident, his leg was blown off?
Yeah.
So you had to pick up the leg and...
Yeah.
But did he die?
I don't know. I never knew later on.
How do you wrap up someone who's lost an arm or a leg?
Well, the stump. You wrap up that stump. See, every soldier had on his belt, they call it a pistol belt, and on the back, every soldier had a large bandage that was about this big and about that thick with a long stream that you could to use to bandage the wound, and every soldier had one. instead of the medic carrying all of them. You understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I used to stop the flow of blood in the stump of the leg, and then just put the severed part of the leg alongside of the one that was still a stump.
What would you say was the saddest thing you saw overseas in combat?
Strangely, that German officer that was shot in the penis. Yeah, he was laying on his back and he said, "Kaput." And I said, "Yeah, alles kaput."
That was the saddest thing?
Yeah.
What was the next saddest thing?
Guy having his chin blown off. I had that.
Most of the guys you were treating, I mean, did they actually look like kids?
Ooh.
The guys you were treating?
Oh, yeah. They were, 19, 20, 21 years old. They were, I'm sure that when they got wounded, their age limit changed. They were no longer a big grown-up guy. Now they're like a child.
When you're running to the wounded, are you trying to time it around the enemy fire, that you think you can get to this guy before that shell hits there, or are you running in a blind?
Blind, hoping that I don't run into a shell or it doesn't hit me. I just go.
And because you have a limited amount of supplies,
Yeah.
are you being conservative with each guy, thinking that you might need it for the next, or are you giving each guy as much as
Whatever is needed. Then I had 2 bags, and one on each side, full of supplies, mostly bandages.
Where I swear this is the very last question. When you were telling me the story about the tracheotomy, the camera kind of moved slightly. Would you mind just telling me that story as if I'd never heard it before?
Okay.
I'll ask you the question.
Okay.
Can you tell me about some of your combat experiences?
Well, there was a American soldier that was wounded by a artillery fragment from an artillery shell that hit him in the chin and blocked the passage of air through his nose and mouth into his lungs. So I had to build a tracheotomy. He's laying out on the field, and I'm laying on my stomach, making this tracheotomy so that he can breathe while being shot at. If I sat up or knelt next to him, I would have been a target. So I was laying on my stomach, and I was able to insert a tube into a hole in his throat so that he could breathe that way. And so I used a fountain pen as a tracheotomy tube so that he could breathe and stay alive. And then maybe 20 some years later at a reunion, I met him and he thanked me. And he had to, when he would speak to me, he had to put his finger over the hole so that he could speak. And then he'd take his finger away, he'd breathe, and that's how he would speak. But he thanked me for at least letting him breathe and stayed alive.
Did you carry fountain pens for this purpose?
Pardon?
Did you carry fountain pens with you for this
purpose?
No.
That fountain pen was given to me by my mother when I went into the service to write letters home with it, and it was just happened to be convenient that I had in my pocket.
And his jaw was?
It was about half of it was gone, blown off, bloody, and so I had to put a hole in here, in the tracheotomy, and insert that tube and tape it to his neck so it wouldn't be swallowed, and he could breathe through there.
As someone who's never seen combat, the wounds that the men would receive, does it usually entail a lot more blood than one would expect?
Yes, yeah. Than would expect from, training and practice and stuff like that. Oh, yeah.
Even the stomach
Oh,
wounds?
yeah. The bleeding is really something else. And frequently in the arms and legs, you get an awful lot of blood. Because the blood vessels are running the length of the legs and the arms.
The guys who you got to put their guts back inside, do you have a bandage specifically for that as well?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's one of those?
Yeah.
Because you can't use regular gauze on that.
No, and it's about that thick too.
Show, put it up.
It's about that thick, and it's quite wide, and you put it on, and you put it with pressure to stop the flow of blood with pressure.
Are you always able to stop the flow of blood?
Yeah.
With enough time and enough bandage?
Yeah. Or with a tourniquet if I needed it. Very seldom did I use a tourniquet, though. I didn't like them because they were dangerous, because they had to be released at least every 20 minutes, or gangrene would set in. And so you had to, if you use a tourniquet, you want to make sure that a doctor or a medical person would see it to release it, so that there'd be a flow of blood again, and then tighten it again. But it was.
What were you gonna say?
Huh?
What were you about to say?
That was it.
You said you were gonna say it was.
It was terrible. Yeah.
And can you show me your hand, please?
This one?
Yeah, up. Turn it. That's from your war wound.
Yeah.